Coming to you live from Nasdaq's market site overlooking New York's Times Square. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Advisory Live, brought to you by Nasdaq Corporate Solutions. I'm your host, Will Briganti, and joining me today is Miles Clouston. Miles, great to have you here.
Great to be here, Will.
For all of our viewers, Miles is a senior director with Nasdaq Corporate Solutions, specializing in our advisory services group. Miles, obviously, this week is a busy time for the team at Nasdaq Advisory Services. The 13F filings have just come out for the second quarter. Break it down for our viewers as to why this is an important and busy time for your team.
It certainly has been a hectic week with all the big filings coming in on the 14th and 15th of this month.
Yep.
So essentially 13F filings are mandated by the SEC for investors to file that have assets under management greater than $100 million. And why it's important is that it gives insights into the holdings of these investors. And so companies that have these investors in their stock, it gives them a glimpse as to what they currently own as of those filings, but then maybe how it's changed quarter to quarter.
Sure.
And while we're on the topic, two other big SEC filings as far as what companies would care about are 13G and 13D filings.
Yeah.
The 13G filing is a filing that an investor has to make if they go over the 5% ownership threshold of a company. And the G is a filing where the investor does not have activist tendencies.
Right.
Versus the 13D is the same thing where the investor holds greater than 5% but could have activist intentions.
Right. So this is incredibly important for monitoring investor surveillance, a really sort of key form that investor relations officers and other IR professionals throughout the companies are looking for every quarter.
Correct. It's a critical piece in our day-to-day and what we use and how we look at ownership and also investor relations and how they look at ownership.
Right.
And in addition to that, what's interesting too is other investors like to see what other key notable
what are their peers
what
doing?
the smart money and their
exactly.
peers are doing as far as where they're putting their money to kind of give them some food for thought.
Okay. Now, my last question for you is obviously the expertise from Nasdaq IR Insight and the advisory services team. Your team is broken up into industry sectors. You're all specialists that specialize, in certain verticals.
Yes.
What are some of the key takeaways or the highlights that your team have seen so far in the last couple of days? Any sort of key things that kind of popped?
From a pure filing standpoint,
Yeah.
absolutely. So given the limited time we have, I'll just touch on maybe a couple of key investors.
Sure.
The first being Fidelity Mutual Fund Giant, the mutual fund giant Fidelity Management.
Yeah.
Over the quarter, over 2Q, it looks like they added a little bit of their exposure to healthcare and technology, which obviously had very good quarters. They're one of the best performing sectors of the quarter.
Okay.
But it looks like they pared back a little bit in consumer cyclicals and financials.
Yeah.
And then the other one I want to touch on just is Warren Buffett. Everyone is always curious as to Warren Buffett's what he's doing. And overall, actually reduced his exposure a little bit to technology, but he still has huge technology exposure while adding financials and consumer cyclicals.
To his portfolio.
Correct, to his portfolio. And then the third one I wanted to touch on, just because it tends to be in the press a lot, is the activist investor, Elliott Management. So Elliott Management overall has been increasing its select exposure to technology as well as energy names while lightening up in financials.
Okay, excellent insight. Thank you so much, Miles, for joining us today on the program. We're going to leave it there.
Great.
All right, so thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in to the Thursday edition of Advisory Live. We'll be back to you next week on Tuesday. I'm going to be speaking with Mike Kratke. Mike is a specialist in Nasdaq Advisory Services healthcare sector practice. So we're going to dig into what's going on with some of the pharmaceutical names as well as biotech. And then next Thursday, we'll be coming to you live from the city of Austin, Texas. We're going to be at the NERI Southwest Regional Conference, where I'll be speaking to our head of strategic capital intelligence, Dan Romito, about what's happening with the activist landscape as well as ESG. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Thursday edition of Nasdaq Advisory Live. Signing off for now. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Miles.